So I have a question, and it has to do with safety. And earlier you were talking about risk and who's going to pay to keep workers safe if they don't, if they're being very, I don't want to say pro-business, but I can't remember exactly how you were saying it. But OSHA, talks a lot about worker safety. And then you have unions, and unions, a lot of things that are written into union contracts, I think, that has to do with safety, hours worked, et cetera, et cetera. When a person is injured at work, but they might not belong to the union, does it matter? Are they, if you're a union member or you're a non-union member and you have a claim, does the union, whatever they work into the contracts covers everybody, I think. Is that correct?
Okay, so workers' compensation laws apply regardless of whether somebody is a member of a union or not. The work comp laws are a creature of statute it was created by the Iowa legislature back in 1913 and has been both improved and then, gutted over the years. So that you don't have to be a member of a union to be covered by work comp. Work comp covers everybody but independent contractors. And remind me, Rhonda, I want to come back to, you were asking about employer fraud. I want to tell you something about that with independent contractors. But so unions, one of the benefits that unions have is that they are able to negotiate for certain safety measures, whether it be limited work hours or ergonomic studies or or fair compensation. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that unions do. But when it comes to workplace safety, the unions have some bargaining power that people who work in a non-union environment do not. But regardless, both are covered by the work comp laws. Okay. Either way, though, whether you're talking about a union environment or a non-union environment, placing the responsibility on the employer, who ultimately is the one making those choices about whether to expend money on safety and improvements, placing that responsibility squarely back on them and not shirking it off to the employees and the taxpayers incentivizes the employers to actually make those workplaces as safe as possible.
Okay.
So
right.
That point I wanted to make when you were asking about employee fraud earlier, I wanted to point out that, or you were talking about fraud within the workers' compensation system. There are, over the years, there are different organizations that keep track of the biggest frauds, within the workers' compensation system. And every year, the biggest fraud cases are always employers who are wrongly classifying injured workers, or who are wrongly classifying their employees as being independent contractors. Well, why do they do that? Because independent contractors are not covered under work comp law, whereas employees are. And so what happens is these employers are saying, well, they're not W-2 employees, they're independent contractors, because then the work comp insurance companies are basing their insurance premiums off a much smaller wage base or employee base than what they would base their premiums on if they really truly accounted for everyone who is actually an employee. And so they call this employee misclassification, which is something that I know that the unions are aware of too. But it's a huge problem. We have it going on in the state of Iowa, where employees are being misclassified as independent contractors when really, truly they should be considered employees and they should be covered by workers' compensation. So, you know, I've handled cases over the years, as have many of my colleagues, where we are fighting the insurance companies because the employer's saying that my client was truly an independent contractor when there was no way they were an independent contractor. You know, my client was told what job to do, when to do it, what tools to use, what kind of, you know, didn't bid any of the jobs. It was taking all direction from the employer when they fell off a roof because they didn't have the safety equipment and, you know, dislocated their shoulder, and the employer saying, oh, we're not responsible for your trip to the emergency room because you're an independent contractor. And they just simply weren't. So we have to spend all this time fighting about whether somebody's an employee to begin with. So that is actually the biggest area of fraud in the workers' compensation system across the United States.